Welcome to the Germinate podcast, where agriculture, business, and innovation take root and thrive. I'm Joe Sampson, and with nearly 2 decades of experience in agricultural equipment and scaling businesses, I'm here to bring you actionable insights, inspiring stories, and strategic advice. Whether you're an industry veteran or just starting out, this podcast is your guide to cultivating ideas, expanding your knowledge, and growing your venture. So let's get started and germinate your path to success. Okay, folks, welcome back to the Germinate podcast. I got a real special guest today, Jeremy Groeteke. He's a friend, he's a mentor, and he's actually a neighbor. So I want to welcome Jeremy to the show. How are you, man?
Doing great, Joe. Yeah, I guess, I don't know, we should have done this in the garage or something, I guess, here, literally neighbors. So no, it's a good time. Great time to be in ag, and thanks for having me on. Glad to sit down and have a good conversation here.
Yeah, well, like I said, thanks for coming on. Give us a little background about who you are, your history in ag, and kind of what you're doing now and where you've been. What's your background?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it relatively short storied. Getting long in the tooth in the ag industry, but so grew up a farm kid. Family still farms back in Nebraska, so active farm kid. Back in the day. After that, actually Huskers, so Big Ten, go Big Red.
We won't fault you for that.
So went to school there, undergrad and master's agronomy and plant physiology. The dirty secret of my background is I've always been a tech junkie at the end of the day. And so even though through my grad years and grad school and farming experience, we had the first yield monitor on the family farm in like 1995. Like, this is the first time that technology hit the floor and hit the fields. Always been dabbling with remote sensing technologies. I've got like Polaroids, right, of satellite high resolution imagery from the 80s that we still. So technology's always been there. First computers back in the day. Dad was progressive in that nature with technology, and so that stuck with me as a kid growing up through college and then in the early career. So after I graduated college and went into the ag industry, I started out in the seed business as a salesman, district sales, and then moved into agronomy research with the Golden Harvest, the seed brand, and Syngenta, then acquired them. So I spent about 7 years with Golden Harvest and Syngenta. After that, then started to grow the family, and we wanted to stick closer to the Nebraska market. Syngenta was looking to move me to Minnetonka back in those days. That was about 20 plus years ago, and found a career with Pioneer at the York Research Center. And so I moved into research then. So I've been in sales and marketing, and then now moving into research at the York Research Center there. And, through a 16-year career with Pioneer and Corteva, you have a lot of different roles. So I moved from research back into marketing and agronomy. Then I moved up to Minnesota for a couple of years, back into a sales position where I was selling digital solutions to growers, building a sales team, managing POs and everything of that nature. And then moved into headquarters here in Des Moines. That's when we became neighbors a long time ago, about 9-10 years ago now, and moved into product development for our digital organization that we had at the time. Did mergers and acquisitions, moved into e-commerce, product strategy. So done a little bit of everything from sales, marketing, research, R&D. I stayed away from the legal and HR groups. That's not my wheelhouse. And then now for the last 3 years, I've been with Syngenta Group. So back to Syngenta, and I'm the head of IT and strategy for Syngenta Group at a global level. And in that, then I have kind of 2 hats. One, I manage all of our IT organization for our vegetable and flowers business. So if you eat Brussels sprouts, when we go out to eat, 90% of the Brussels sprouts are coming from Syngenta seeds, as an example, in that nature. And so it's a fun, different version. Yeah, it's a fun version compared to corn and soybeans, where I've spent a lot of my career. that gets me way closer to the consumer. Because when you walk into a grocery store, I can say, "Oh, hey, we grow that, we produce the seed for that tomato or that watermelon or that." So it's a fun change of pace. And then the other side of my world, I lead our global kind of data science, AI, machine learning, what we call computational agronomy, in that nature. And so that's really your innovation, and try to bring that technology to market for the organization. So it's been a fun career. Some days I wake up and I think I'm still, the young buck out of school and don't know much. And then also when I start to work with them, I'm realizing like starting to get long in the tooth here, and I got a few
Yeah.
things I need to share from an advice back to that next generation.
Yeah, you and I are the same, man. It's crazy how fast the time goes by, and all of a sudden it's 20, 25 years later, and here we sit. But one little fun fact about you're probably not going to remember this, but I'm going to bring this up. Our daughters are friends as well, for those listening, but I think it was a homecoming. This was maybe 2 or 3, no, probably more like 3 years ago now. And you can tell me this, but we were sitting down eating dinner, and you and another buddy started talking about Chat GPT. And I'm like, what's Chat GPT? I have no idea what this. Do you remember this dinner?
Yeah, barely, because
Yeah,
I
probably.
think the dinner went long.
Yeah, exactly. But you brought it up, and all of a sudden it like changed my perspective. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is crazy. This is this real? What is happening here?" And dude, that was 3 years ago, and think of where we're at today. It's wild. So, that's I mean, that's something that you obviously brought to the table, and you've been thinking about AI and technology basically your whole career there, it sounds like. So, talk a little bit about how you work at Syngenta, which my audience is not used to, some of these bigger companies, but talk about how that transition into AI is being incorporated not only in your day-to-day life but in the business world as well.
Mhm. Yeah, so it's I'll build on your story there a little bit for 3 years ago. So I have a pretty strong stance that um, technology plus humans is the future, right? And I don't really care the level of technology you want to refer to. You can look at horse to tractor in agriculture, right? The farmers that adopted the tractor first outcompeted the growers that kept the horses, right? And this evolution continues to happen. The growers that adopted biotechnology traits faster than the growers that didn't grew in scale. So I don't, you could, that's why, technology plus human always wins. And AI is this next kind of phase. And I get asked all the time as an agronomist in that nature, is AI going to replace an agronomist? And to me, my continuous comeback is the agronomist that uses AI is going to replace the agronomist that doesn't, at the end of the day. And so back to your story, why I say that is I gave my kids free reign to use ChatGPT when it came out. There was a lot of parents, I think, out there in the day that were sitting there going, "Oh my God, this is cheating, right? It's writing the homework for them, etc." And I'm like, yeah, like in 20 years, you can't comprehend where AI is actually going to be. You need to understand as a human how to work with it, leverage it, and become better with it, not compete against it. And I think sometimes we as an industry in ag, we find ourselves trying to compete with the technology, whatever that is, traits, machinery, AI in this example, instead of leveraging it for making us better. And that's really the mentality I think we take here at Syngenta Group, and then myself, even with technology, is how do you take it? I don't care your role, if you're sales, marketing, R&D, a grower, and leverage that technology to your advantage. To me, that's a key framing.
Yeah, it's even in my consulting business. It's what, 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks old as we record this now, but I'm telling you, man, like it's like having a virtual assistant. It really is. Only even more so because it's so much faster and so much more reactive. And I mean, the other day there was a customer that I was working with, or that I'm working on a proposal for, and I kind of just You can role play. There's certain role playing that you can do that you can utilize, what answers for this and what answers for that. And it just really has made someone in my seat now as starting my own consulting business where there's a lot of ins and outs. Just makes everything so much easier. And I think that's perfect to your point of it's not going to replace the sales guy or the agronomist or the engineer, but it is if you don't embrace it. It's coming and it's coming really fast. I mean, our story that we started with, it was three, maybe not even, maybe it was only 2 years
Even
ago.
about
I can't
two.
remember, but
Yeah.
from what that was to we were asking like, what should we have for dinner tonight? I'm in the mood for this. To now, it's wild. I mean, it's really growing and taking over. And I think it does, you're right, it does scare people. I wonder why. I don't quite understand that other than technology always scares people, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a little black boxish, right? And so it'll scare people from that standpoint. But again, if you don't embrace it and wrap your hands around it, sure. The first time you go water skiing, snow skiing, whatever it is, it's scary as hell. But until you embrace it and make the step, right, you're never going to learn. And I think that's the piece too that you have to take advantage of as you go into this industry or any industry is continued learning from a framing. And so if you're not going to have a continued learning mindset, you're going to end up being left behind and end up in a fear state of, whatever that is from a technology or even policies and politics from that standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good little transition there, but I love that continue learning. And yeah, that's something that we all should kind of keep focus on and keep growing and keep. That's the whole point of this podcast. It's called Germinate for a reason. I mean,
Yeah, I
grow
love the
as an
name.
You like the name? Good. Yeah. It's funny. It took me a couple of weeks to even think of that. I had all these other names in mind, but I'm like, Germinate. Let's let that one roll. But yeah, why not keep growing and learning as an individual and as a business? And if businesses surround themselves with those type of people, I mean, hold on tight. The sky's the limit here for where these places can go in the world. So, um, yeah, before we move on to that, tell the audience here, just what are some, I don't know, top two, three, four, five ways that you maybe personally use AI or that Syngenta uses AI to kind of better your individual day or your, kind of individual or the company's kind of perspective moving forward? That might be a hard question, but what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I can tell you, right? And so I think there's two frames. How I personally use it as a to be a better manager, a better thought leader, content creation. So I think that's the power of the latest evolution of generative AI. So generative AI by definition generates content, right? It generates language, video, voice, whichever one you're trying to go after. And so that to me is what's hugely powerful now is that, hey, ChatGPT, Gemini, whoever you want, I'm going to use names, not promoting any one of them, but
Sure.
it can help you with content creation. Draft a proposal, right? Help me think through a blue ocean, red ocean strategy for this marketplace. Like, I hate to say it, but the consultants of the world, McKinsey, BCG, and all these, they're at high risk because a lot of that information you can now get really quickly by yourself if you engage and empower it. I also think the technology can make the McKinseys and BCGs more powerful, and yourself, Joe, in a consultant industry as a way more effective human. And it allows actually more smaller businesses to compete with the big business just from a content creation standpoint. And so for me, that's really how I use a lot of the generative AI technologies from a personal standpoint in my day-to-day business is just helping me actually move faster at the end of the day. I'll have it draft something up and then I can edit it down to what the real facts are. Like, never take it for as it is, right? You've always got to tweak it and modify it because it is generative AI. But it helps you move through stuff a lot faster as a human. You can 10x yourself on a lot of components. So I think that's the human side, or personal growth and leverage. The other side of that is Oh, and the other piece I use, what I love is like when I'm at conferences, like you turn on, the voice recorder and just it loads all the information. It converts that speech that you just listened to into bulleted points and summaries that you can turn around and get it right. How many times you've sat at a conference and a guy rattles on for 20 minutes and just like, God, I wish I would have had that. And now you can just sit there and record it. Like those type of productivity improvements are huge. Um, Syngenta now, how do we do this? What are we doing? So what we see here, the story I'll tell you is as much as I'll go back to my college days. So when I went to school, any of us go to school, but mine was in the agronomy and plant physiology world. We learned individual disciplines: soil science, plant science, entomology, weather, climate, water. Like you learned the individual disciplines of the science that you needed to understand. And you did that, and then I went through, graduate, right? Then I go out in the real world, get a job as a crop consultant, and then I'm walking cornfields, and now I'm looking at a corn plant, a soybean plant with my eyes, ears, looking at where guys screwed up with the disc pass and had too much compaction, right? All kinds of stuff in your head.
Right.
And I was using perception technologies. Those perception technologies were my eyes, my ears, my fingers, right? And then really what happens is my brain brings all that together. And so in the computer's world, that's a neural net. Your head, your brain is a neural net algorithm. And that's really what we're doing today with AI is we no longer have to solve these problems in silos, which is what we've been doing for the last 10 years or decade. Is here's your yield prediction algorithm, here's your disease prediction algorithm, etc. Now, with the advent of AI and the generative language models and agents to agent communication, we can combine that much like I did as a human. I have computer vision algorithms that can see a leaf tissue and tell me what disease it is, much like my eyes could. Like all of it is starting to come together and move at a much rapid pace. And so at Syngenta, we've launched what we call CropWise AI. This is then again that same piece. It's helping our sales teams go through our product catalogs at a much faster pace and place the right hybrids, varieties into a grower's portfolio for him to get the best product performance. And that's all of what this is about, is making sure the growers at the farm gate maximize yields at the end of the day.
So is that pretty recent for you guys? I mean, are we talking this has just been implemented in the last like couple of years since AI has really taken off?
Yeah, so we started pretty much about a month after ChatGPT was launched with a hackathon. I called the hackathon actually Jarvis, codename Jarvis for the Marvel's fan out there, and Tony Stark, right?
Oh yeah.
Jarvis is the AI that he talks to. So that was the code name of the project, was Jarvis. And I literally asked the team, I said, build me Jarvis, right? I want speech to text and everything. And within a week, we put together a prototype for irrigation management, product recommendation, soup to nuts. And so, like, okay, there's something here. And so then from that point on, we partnered with AWS and other partners. And then just this last year, we launched CropWise AI to gold or growers across Golden Harvest here in our GHX network in North America. So the thing you got to keep in mind is that it's a generative component, and in agriculture, generative responses may not be accurate enough, right? We deal in absolutes when you think about pesticide applications. Like we got to make sure we choose the right product, or we may kill something that we didn't intend to.
Right.
So you got to work through some of those details to make sure you're making the right recommendation, and you have the data sets from our R&D programs to support that. So that's what we built and just rolled out here in the last year.
Yeah, it's wild how fast this is all happening too. And I'm telling you, we could do a whole show for hours on AI, and we should. I'll have you back on this one and we'll talk about it. But it's fascinating to me, obviously, and I think you nailed it too. It 10x's the speed of us, which why wouldn't you want to do that if you're in the working world? Let's let it rip and move as fast as we possibly can. So yeah, that's a great explanation. And like I said, we could talk about this for forever. But let's dive into some other topics. Just why we got you here, man. I was in the Louisville Farm Show. This was what, middle of February, so a couple of weeks ago. Everybody was talking about tariffs. Tariff. What are the tariffs going to do? How much is steel going to go up? What's it going to do to the commodity price? Are we ever going to be able to sell anything? We were talking a little bit before this, and you were like, yeah, we're talking about it here in the States, but you travel internationally quite a bit. In fact, it seems like you're always traveling internationally, by the way, these days. But talk a little bit about how the U.S. tariffs that Trump is either has already implemented or is thinking about implementing, and how that affects the international world.
Yeah, like we were talking there, Joe, is that I think I am surprised how much the international audience in agriculture, like the first question they ask, like because they know I'm from the States, hey, what's happening with the tariffs? Like, and I think that's also a function that of the current time we're sitting in. It's a day-to-day change. I mean, literally before we got on to do this recording, like Trump's talking about Europe tariffs on this, like in real time. Like, so that's probably the hardest part right now. Is you can't forecast it, what or how much from a tariff standpoint is going on. And ag's a long cycle, right? I mean, we plant a crop and it sits in the ground for 3 to 4 months for the most part for the large broadacre crops. And so, if there's going to be tariffs on imports of grains and commodities from a U.S. standpoint, or any other country, it's tough for growers to make that decision. Like, what am I going to have for a tariff when I go to harvest versus what I'm planting now? Because you can't forecast it. I think it's same thing for the manufacturers. You mentioned the Louisville Farm Show, the steel tariffs. Like, what does it mean to be able to forecast on this? And so that's the tough conversations that are being had right now. Everybody's speculating, right, without information because it changes so fast.
Yeah, and it came in a time in our industry where we had some really good years. Everybody was cooking with gas there during the COVID times. And then all of a sudden, about a year ago about a year ago, February, things just hit a brick wall, and business pretty much in all spectrums of agriculture, the equipment, the grain, all sides of things just stopped. And so we're all looking for a way to rejuvenate this market. And now all of a sudden there are these tariff talks that, it does feel to me a little bit excusey, because it's one of those things none of us can control. You nailed it. It could change tomorrow. And, whether we like Donald Trump or not like Donald Trump, the reality of it is that dude's mind changes every 30 seconds. So tomorrow something different might happen. So it's one of those things we can't control. And I think a lot of us in industries like manufacturing, for example, are trying to control it. And that's probably a mistake, because you should really just be focusing on what are those things that can generate you revenue, and put all your energy, all your efforts into that, and move forward. So, is it an excuse, or is it something that we should really be keeping our eye on? I think the answer to that might be both. What's your take on that? How it's affected sort of the Syngenta side of things, the crop science, the crop protection, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a monitor and observe and monitor, right? Don't overreact. I mean, my advice to those out there today in the trenches is that don't overreact, monitor, but risk mitigate, right? If you're in the steel industry or the grain industry, watch your hedges, right? I mean, most of the time, if we go back to his first term, when the tariffs kind of ace card up your sleeve came out to play this, the ripple effect was the supply chains moved accordingly, right? And so I think that'll play out for however they fall. So again, yeah, my advice is, stick to your guns. Example that where as in the data and IT side of the world where I try to focus and watch this is, you can look at AI, right? It's a national security issue for us here in the U.S. We want to make sure we maintain control over that, and we need to. And so I'm trying to watch and monitor what we're looking at from where chips can go, where they can't. Now, I don't build foundational models, so like those type of regulations don't affect us at Syngenta Group. What we really do is leverage existing models from Anthropic, Gemini, ChatGPT, OpenAI. And so, but the different countries around the world, when you're a global player, big business, you've got to watch out for that because like Australia was looking at banning DeepSeek, for those that saw that blow up here about 2-3 weeks ago. And so they're looking at banning DeepSeek. Well, that's great, fine, all for that. But that changes what I have to do from maybe an infrastructure where I got to make sure I deploy Anthropic, which is what we actually use today. And so if India says you can't use Anthropic tomorrow, for me in an infrastructure standpoint, I've got to think about how I swap out and go to OpenAI or Gemini. And so I've got to maintain flexibility. And so that's why I say monitor, but don't overreact. Because things change pretty dynamically. Keep your ability to react kind of at the front of your decision-making standpoint. So if you're going to have to buy or sell grain, or you're thinking about planting more corn or less beans based on speculative, keep that nimble, that ability to react. As a grower, like on my family farm and my brothers, leave a few acres open that you can make last-minute decisions before the planters go in the ground. Do the fertilizer on last that you could switch from corn to beans if the markets change between now and planting season. So keep some flexibility to hedge your risk in these times is key.
Yeah, I like that, being nimble. I mean, flexible, being nimble. You have to stay on your toes, and there's a lot of moving parts right now in the industry, and really all industries. So stay on top of it. Obviously, you're a well educated person. What are some of the things that are that these listeners should look at as far as what trends should we see? Everybody looks at commodity prices. Everybody looks at kind of trying to figure out these tariffs. What are some of the pieces that you look at to try to maybe forecast and see where the market's shifting?
I don't know if there's a good one on that. I think you rattled off the good ones. I, I guess the one that I always try to watch is just wealth. And so that's I guess, a GDP indicator, I guess you could go back to. And so it's pretty common that as wealth grows, your disposable income increases, especially in the ag world. You start eating if you're living on rice, you may move up to fish. If you're living on fish, you may move to chicken, right? You move up the food cost ladder at the end of the day. Even in the United States, you may be living on as a college student living on Burger King and Amigos or whatever, and as you get employed, you start moving up and you go to Applebee's, and as you get bigger, you go to Ruth Chris, right? You move up kind of the food ladder, and so to me, this is a factor I tend to watch, and inflation's a big one here too, because any pressure for that to get disrupted, that we're not growing the wealth of the global population, has a detrimental impact to me or not detrimental. It shifts the food supply chain that needs to be produced. Because if we don't lift out people out of poverty at the global level, we're going to have to produce more rice, right? Full stop. Rice and wheat, like breads and rice. We got to produce more of that. If we keep growing people out of poverty up, like we got to produce more fruits, veggies, beef, proteins, because that your appetite naturally just goes up. And so that to me is a leading indicator to watch, as well as the inflation and interest rates. Those two things help me, because ag's such long cycles. It's generational type change that happens. So those are a couple that I try to watch and look at and see, do we have any disruptions in that? The Ukraine-Russia war is a good example of that, when Africa got put under stress because the wheat wasn't able to ship out of Ukraine into the African market for a while. So it puts pressure on crop prices and those type of things. So it's got to come from somewhere else in the world. Those are the type of things that I tend to try to watch.
Yeah, it's interesting because we live in a world now where we can kind of funnel our news cycle to what piques our interest, or at least what we think piques our interest. There's an algorithm working behind the scenes. Everybody probably should understand that. And every now and again, go ahead and flip over to the other side. There is another side, whatever side you're on. But the funneling of news, it's almost like media today, the media that we were used to growing up, the CNNs, the Fox, all those, they're slowly dying, and they're going to become pretty much obsolete, because why sit through a story? Don't worry, I'm going to get to a point here. But why sit through a story when it doesn't interest you, or you don't need to hear it, or it might not be about our work or our lives or our kids or whatever it may be? So we can kind of funnel our news, be it X these days, or you can get a lot of news on ChatGPT. So is that what you're doing, or do you still go to old school media? It doesn't seem like you're that kind of a guy at all. You're a Twitter X guy, and
Yeah,
yeah, just to
yeah,
find. I mean, there's so many good follows out there as far as trends and things like that to look at. But yeah, what's your take on that?
yeah. Always been on Twitter/X through the brand change and the ups and downs of that since kind of a long time ago. So yeah, my news sources and feeds come from that, and frankly podcasts and that nature. I agree that the traditional media is struggling. The one thing though that I see that I'm now struggling with the way I consume feed is, if you think about traditional media, they would bite size everything up: sports, news, politics, whatever, right? And so you could kind of get a little bit of a one-stop shop at the end of the day. It didn't matter what you went to; they all kind of did the same thing. If you watch your local Channel 8 News or 10, whatever it is, right?
Right.
Um, in today's world, though, you can get bite sizes, but what I find, like even in my X feed, I've got like, okay, sports, I've got news and politics, I've got agriculture, I got influencers, like different segments that I'm trying to put almost into what I would say what traditional media did, was bite size it out. And so the long form podcast is awesome, but I struggle finding the time to listen to Rogan and Ollie and you and Mark Drew, all these guys that are putting great content out. It becomes problematic from a time bandwidth standpoint. And so I think this, you'll see long form podcasts and news really drive. Look at, what was it, Megyn Kelly? She kind of blew up. Tucker blew up when they all went by themselves and broke off from mainstream. But I think the consumer is going to have to find a way to condense it and absorb it at a much faster pace. And I think we'll get back to AI doing a lot of these summaries of long form and getting it into consumable bite size chunks. That'll happen and play out.
Hmm. That's super interesting. Yeah, I never really thought about that, but you're right. If you follow 4 or 5 podcasts, I mean, I'm a podcast guy when I'm working out, or maybe when I'm walking the dog, or when I'm driving in the car, but there's only so many hours of the day you're doing those things. So, yeah, there's no way you can consume 10 hours worth of podcast in one day. I mean, it's just impossible. So, interesting to bring AI back into the mix on that. Might be the future on just condensing those bite-sized things, because you're right. Sometimes I miss who won the local Dowling versus Johnston basketball game. I don't even pay attention to it, and I feel bad about that. I should. Whereas when I was watching the local news, I knew the local high schools. I knew what the Tuesday night score was. Now I have no idea. Yeah, man, that's interesting on what that future is and where it's going to go. What do you think? What do you think the future of AI is? If you had to sum it up in maybe a couple of different points. I know that's challenging, but what it's going at rapid, like super speed, sonic speed. So I don't know. The sky's almost the limit here.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. Like I can see it in a 1 or 2 year time frame, right? You'll get to AI will get to that point here in a 1 or 2 year time frame, that much like you kind of go to Google for everything, you're going to go to AI to book your plane tickets, to plan your vacation, give you ideas of where to, like, that will happen really quickly. Like your calendar will see that you have to be in Chicago in 2 weeks, and you can just set up an AI agent to book your hotel and flight and get you there. Like, that's going to happen in the next couple of years.
Yep.
What I can't get my head around is a couple factors that are playing out at the macro scale. Cost of energy is going to be a massive thing. So all the GPU and energy, nuclear, you've seen some of the big boys, Google, AWS, buy nuclear plants. China's been putting nuclear plants on. Europe is switching back from the Green Deal to put more energy on. So energy is a big play. That cost will drive down over time. You've got a new computing technology coming, which is this quantum computing. Microsoft just released a new chip on that a lot of people can't understand. I mean, computing today is ones and zeros. Quantum is actually a state where it's not even in either state, right? So there's a different component. It's a different level. And then the Moore's law and where we've been moving with AI. So what I can't predict, even to think through, is what you combine all of those factors together and what it looks like in 20 years from now when my kids are my age, and what does things look like. I mean, look at Tesla, look at the ag equipment. Just get consumer stuff out of the conversation here. Look at what tractors have done, Joe, in our lifespan. I grew up on a 40-20 open air cab trying to move hay bales. You can now buy a robotic bale mover with no human on it to put in the pasture and pick up bales and put it on the side. Like, that's in my lifespan, right?
Right.
And John Deere, they've released the I think the 8R for tillage with no human in the tractor, and no that it can just go out and do tillage. That's been in our lifespan, and so again, put another 20 years onto this stuff with the capabilities that are headed. I really can't get my head around some of that potential change.
Yeah, and you got a big brain, man. And if your brain can't get around it, not many's can. I know mine can't. And it's wild to think about, even in business too, just of all the day-to-day tasks that we're so used to doing. And it can be as simple as, purchase orders and how to buy and point of sales and customer proposals and, sales strategies, all these things that are just, they're going to be 20, 30x in probably no time flat. And to maybe bring this conversation back full circle, it's coming, folks. And if you're not getting on board, you're going to get blown away by it, because it's almost like it's already here. You have to embrace it at this point in time. You have no choice.
Yeah, I think too is to try to put in some practical things here. I think for the sales guys out there knocking on doors, the R&D scientist that's making a pollination or a cross, that stuff and that skill set's not going to go away, right? You're still going to have to knock on doors in that nature. But I think the thing you have to think about is, look at Amazon Prime. I can order a product from Amazon today and it shows up at my doorstep maybe in 6 hours or the next day. What is limiting us from doing that in agriculture? Our supply chains are very antiquated and old to move large volumes of product, but that expectation is being set, and ag tends to just lag, but the expectation has been set because of the consumer environment. I mean, my brothers and all them on the farm, they experience prime in those natures too. It's not in the urban market, and so that's going to put pressure, on us input manufacturers. Is how do we become easier to do business with? How do we manage our working capital? Right, you got capital tied up in inventory. So how do you optimize that so you're not sitting on it? And again, back to your trade comment, because if you've got inventory sitting in raw steel or raw tech from active ingredient standpoint, and you're not moving it through the supply chain, its cost structure is much different than what your potential price point is selling out the door. And you can get inverted real quick. You can go in your favor too, right? Depending on which way that teeter-totter you're on. But we in ag are going to have to figure out ways to be way more flexible and nimble and shrink kind of that days of inventory, as you want to tie into some hard business principles, to allow your sales team to be reactive to potential changes that are happening in real time.
Yeah, that's wild, man. You guys gotta follow this guy. I mean, you can tell he is very insightful on not just what's happening today, but what's happening in the future. So at the end, we'll let him know how to follow you, man. But you are a very kind of well connected guy as well. What Just to kind of wrap this whole thing up, what do you do on a day to day basis to kind of get away from it, to unwind, to get the thoughts out of your brain, and just live on to fight another day? What's your go to strategy there?
On a daily standpoint, as much as possible, get to the gym
Yep.
at the end of the day. The other is disconnect. I mean, I like being outdoors as much as possible. Frankly, I don't feel like I get enough of it because I go from my office to the gym, so I'm trying to work on that balance. But a good example, recently out on a business trip, popped off to go hit the slopes snow skiing for a day. Like that ability to decompress, mountain bike, water ski. I don't care what your thing is. There's something to be said for getting outside, outdoors, in the environment, Mother Nature. That's the ag geek guy in me, I guess. Walking cornfields. I swear I could hear the corn plants talking to me some days. I was in the cornfield so long. That decompression of getting away, and I can think of like mountain biking. When I go mountain biking, the skill that you have to do mountain biking, you got to watch like 2 inches in front of your tire for the rock that you got to steer past, but you got to look, 10, 20 yards ahead to see what's coming. Because am I going to go up a climb or down the climb to shift, right? You've got to process 2 inches and 10 yards in front of you. And that type of intensity kicks every work idea out of my head. Because if you don't, you're going to go over the handlebars and crack your collarbone or something like that. And so
Right. You don't
those
have
are the
time to
type of
think.
things. Yeah, that's the type of stuff that I do to reset and check myself at the door.
Yeah, it's those activities where it doesn't allow you the time to even think, except
Yeah.
for about that specific activity that you're doing right then and there. And yeah, that's a good one. I know you're a mountain biker. That's good stuff. And even us getting together and throwing back a few beers, I think it's good to
Yeah.
learn. I love learning from people. In fact, that's the only way I can, is just learning from people in all walks of life. So sometimes you got to get in front of them to do that. And whether it be a neighbor, a colleague, a buddy, um, you know, those are something that we got to do here shortly, man. We got to go and grab a beer. We'll do it for sure. Um, we'll tell everybody how they can get in touch with you and Syngenta, and we'll kind of wrap it up.
Yeah, no, you can pretty much find me in the social networks, at Groeteke on X, LinkedIn, Jeremy Groeteke. Those are probably the easiest places to find me. LinkedIn's pretty easy to search me up. There ain't a lot of Groetekes out there in the world, so we're pretty easy to find out there. So hit me up there. Glad to connect with anybody and share. I'm with you, Joe. Like, um, keeping the network up and running, it takes energy and time. Like, one secret I have, I don't know if it's a secret because I've been telling too many people this anymore, is pretty much from the 1st of December till about January 15th, like I dedicate as much physical time as I possibly can for networking. Like I actively scour my social media. Like I unfollow people, follow more people. I scour my LinkedIn, reset profiles, make connections, set up meetings with people that maybe are outside my normal regime and day to day. You got to put the energy in, but it's great. So always open. Anybody hits me up, I usually listen to them and go from there and learn and make connections.
Yeah, I'll put your LinkedIn and X and all those on the show notes here. Have you read Atomic Habits, by the way?
I have like audio booked it, so there's a big difference between reading a book and using audio,
Oh, for
and so
sure.
I don't feel like I can absorb them as good when I listen to them. Yes, I've listened to it, but I struggle with retaining it as
Yeah.
much.
Well, you kind of nailed it. It's all about, we're closing up here, but it's all about forming those habits. And you said it, this time of the year, I do this to kind of intentionally
Yeah.
get, build your brand and build content. And I think those are super good rules to have. But clearly, man, we're going to have you back on and talk more about all these topics. I cannot thank you enough. Appreciate you so much.
No, this is great, Joe. Looking forward to it, and can't wait to talk to everybody on the other side. So,
all right, man. Thanks so much. See you guys.
See you, Joe.
Hey, folks, thanks for tuning into the Germinate podcast. If you found value in today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others in the industry. And join me next time as we continue to explore the innovations and strategies shaping the future of agriculture and business. Until then, keep growing, keep innovating, and keep germinating your success.